Hello, I'm Dani Davies and I'm running for the Hatchwarren and Beggarwood Borough Council seat for the All-In Party. And today I want to talk about planning and infrastructure. So this has been a huge topic since I started canvassing in 2023. Totally understandable, more housing needs the infrastructure to support it, like GPs, schools, I don't know, a nice new hospital perhaps. I wish we could say a blanket no to homes with no infrastructure, but that's not actually how planning regulations work. So let's talk about how it does work and what power your local representatives have in reality. So, firstly, Borough Council does not decide how many houses we have to build, Westminster does. So we can't just wave a sign and say no. We are ruled by the government's national planning policy framework. The Labour government has upped the housing number from the already huge number that the Conservatives dictated, and Basingstoke was forced to plan for an additional 6,000 homes. Parts of this housing quota might be led by the Borough Council sourcing land and designing holistic communities, like with the Many Down development, which has been on the cards since the 90s, which is literally the decade that I was born, and is finally being brought forward by the current Independent and Liberal Democrat administration. Some parts will be filled by private development. So, for example, someone sells land and then they sell that land to a developer. The developer submits the planning application. And then, as the local planning authority, Borough Council gets to say yes or no. Each planning application goes to the Development Control Committee, which is about a dozen cross party councillors. But the decision on each application can only be made on the basis of that specific one. So, for example, you might say no to something that endangers a rare protected species inhabiting that particular area. The committee aren't permitted to say no on the basis of the wider context of too much building in the borough, even if the total puts a strain on services and we aren't getting the matching investment in infrastructure, as is the case. They can only look at the application in front of them. So when parties tell you that they're simply going to say no to building houses, it's not actually something that they have the ability to do. Borough councillors can vote applications down, but then the developer appeals, which costs thousands in local taxpayer cash in court costs, and then wins because we haven't followed government regulations. And so you get the houses anyway, but then you get them on the back foot with less say as to what they should look like or who they should be for, no thought for the community need, scant regard for the environment, and then a big court bill on top. If we could wave a magic wand, one of the first things that we would change at the All-In Party, as well as, everything else, is how planning works. It's a ridiculous system with barely any local control. And for the record, I agree that Basingstoke cannot sustain more development without the infrastructure, and Hatchwarren and Beggarwood has been particularly affected. But that is the system in which we are working right now. What we can do is get on the front foot with planning the development and pushing back on the government's planning policy framework at the same time. That's what the current council administration are doing. You may have seen recent announcements saying that because of issues around water supply, we now have enough evidence to push back on the housing numbers that the government are foisting on Basingstoke. I'll share the full study below, but essentially, the Environment Agency and Natural England have supported and reinforced Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council's concerns around water supply issues for the new homes required. On the basis of this, the administration will push back as much as it possibly can because we can then demonstrate that water and sewage is a huge problem for these houses. Part of that, of course, is because of privatisation of utilities. So water companies prioritise shareholders way above investing in infrastructure, and they aren't regulated. So that's what happens when you take necessary public services like water or health or power and you give it to companies whose goal is to make money. But that's a video for another time. As your borough council candidate, I want to be part of this complex and frankly frustrating work because I know that it's the only real way to get this done. Anyone who tells you that representatives in borough council can say a simple no to house building either doesn't understand how it works or is telling you what they think you want to hear. But that's not what we're here for at the All-In Party. One of my aims as your all in candidate is to be transparent and truthful about how things work, because it is overly complicated, which means that it's not accessible to everyone. We should all have better information on how these things work so that we're represented honestly and we can get the very best for the town that we all care about. Thanks, everyone.